Standard Beauty. Welcome, Anne. I'm not sure if I'm going to say
Hi.
Anne or Anne Catherine.
You can say Anne if that's easier for
Anne
you.
Catherine
Yeah.
sounds so English.
Very German.
And not German.
Very German. I'm
sounds-
actually from Germany.
Yes,
Yes,
yes. So if
yeah.
you can give us a little introduction about, I know you've got the German background and I know you had a love for South Africa or have a love for South Africa. So just give us a little introduction of how you
Sure.
actually got here.
Sure. So before we jump in, just want to apologize. I've been sick this week, so my voice is a bit scratchy. I came to South Africa 4 years ago, actually, and I moved here for love. Very romantic. I finished my bachelor's degree in business economics in Germany, and I was done with my studies. I'm like, where am I going to go in the world? And I thought, let's go to South Africa for an adventure. I thought I'm just going to go for a couple of months, but here I am 4 years later having Standard Beauty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So tell me, what was when you just started thinking about designing the product range, what was the process? Because often we have people listening in our audience who are also sort of past cosmetic diploma students, or they're working at companies and they want to design their own range. So can you tell us the process that you went through in your head of how you decided to go about building a brand, and actually starting it from even just thinking about what were the key ingredients
Sure.
for the company's image?
Sure. I actually started Standard Beauty in the middle of lockdown, so that was June 2020, so 2
Sure.
years ago, long time ago. At that time, there was actually no other local brand available, so I saw that every South African was purchasing those overseas brands, and
Imported
I'm
brands.
like, imported brands, and you spend like 500 rand, 600 rand for a product in a time of lockdown when everyone had financial hardships.
Yes, yes.
So I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I thought, why not? I think South Africa has beautiful resources. We've got amazing raw material. We've got amazing talent. So I wanted to create a brand that is from South Africa for South Africa.
Perfect. So do you think, before we touch on the ingredients and your signature sort of like coding of your brand, because you do use some signature ingredients, do you think going forward in the future with this love for South Africa, you will incorporate more sort of natural extracts from South Africa, or going along any botanical theme coming from South Africa in your brand as well?
Yes, definitely. I mean,
Okay.
at Standard, we're always active ingredients first. It's really important, like hyaluronic acid, alpha arbutin, to put those first. But with that being said, yes, we are exploring to see what other truly African raw materials we can incorporate into our range.
And did you start like typically from sort of the back door from your house type of thing before you
Type of
got-
thing, yes.
Take us through that.
Yes. So I do have some online diplomas in how
Yes.
to formulate, obviously, skincare. So I did do my own formulations. I came up with my own formulations. I've done a lot of online research. But obviously, before we launched it into the market, I did send it off to a third-party lab to get stability testing, microbiology testing, and all of that. But the very first products I did come up with myself.
So that would take quite a bit of capital investment, or do you have like a
Not
background
even.
with
I started with 3,000 rand.
3,000 rand?
3,000
3,000 rand.
3,000
South
rand.
Africa, we say.
South Africa, yeah. But I've started very, very slow. I've started making 10 hyaluronic acids. I've put them on Take-A-Lot. I see they're sold, and I used all the profit, and then I made 20 units.
Wow.
So I
wow.
started really from the bottom on.
Okay, and so now have you got a mini warehouse now? Where are you
Yes.
now?
We're actually just down the road here in
Okay.
Marlborough.
Okay.
We've got our own warehouse, filling lines, in-house laboratory, marketing, customer service. So it's like a mini warehouse. I've got a team of 15 women. So
Yes.
it's really interesting.
So how do you feel about the whole sort of gender thing for work? Do you land up employing more women in South Africa, or men, or how does it work? How's your
I'm
feeling?
actually only employing women
I thought
to
I'd
fill
test
the
you.
gap. Yes, because I think for men it's
Sorry, Ronald.
it's so much easier for men to get work in South Africa, and
Yeah.
if they do, they always get paid more. So I want to do my part to the world by employing women and paying fairly.
Okay, great. So I suppose without asking too much sort of secrets going forward, how does it work with your R&D? Like, do you have, because you're a very small knit company, started from the ground up. So how do you do brainstorming? Is it maybe with your travels internationally, you see something? How do you work that into what is going to be the new range going forward, or extensions to the Standard Beauty range?
So it's a couple of approaches.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go abroad and I see a really amazing product. So then I give that to my formulator and I'm like, what could we do with something similar to this? Or we brainstorm, we invite the suppliers because they've got amazing presentations like we've seen now on like the newest ingredients and raw material. It just sounds so futuristic, some of them. And then we have a whole brainstorming session with our cosmetic chemical engineer and we come up with a product.
And can you tell me what has been, I mean, with starting the whole business, what has been, I'm sure there's been a couple of milestones, what has been maybe one of the most challenging milestones other than starting with 3,000 rand?
So for some of the people that follow the brand, obviously very sore point to talk about. Earlier in the year, we did have to recall a product
Yes,
because it didn't meet its claims.
So when you say it doesn't meet its claims, meet its claims to who? Were you taken to book on that, or how do you say it doesn't meet its claims?
So we're manufacturing everything in-house,
Yes.
but that particular product I'm referring to, we were importing from overseas.
Okay,
Yes,
understood.
yes. And unfortunately, it only became apparent to us after the launch that
Yes.
there were issues with the product. So then we had to do a public recall in April, which obviously was a huge...
So other than being a financial, I mean, that's a financial implication then, how do you think the public reacted, or what have you learned, or because normally in situations like this, you know, with regards to branding and stuff, it's all about integrity or authenticity, listening. So how do you, other than financially it must have impacted you, but how do you think you managed it with the public, or the public response, or customer service?
We obviously went the hard route and had to do a whole public recall, a public address.
Yes.
And for Standard Beauty, we're always very transparent. It's really important to us to always do the right thing. So for
Yes.
us to go out publicly and do the recall rather than just quietly sweeping it under the carpet, that was really hard. But we had to do the right thing. And I think our customers really appreciated the transparency, and I'm still a young CEO, so unfortunately mistakes happen. And no, it was beautiful to see the support of our customers, to see thank you so much for owning up to your mistake, for being
Exactly.
transparent.
Yes.
And yeah.
And I think that's so important to see in brands, because often, sometimes what happens is you don't get that authenticity, and you don't get that sort of listening to the public. And it's actually all just about how do you manage the response, because
Exactly.
we don't get to hear about these things that happen. And that's why, you know, with a platform like this, for those listeners that are out there, it's great to understand what are these tribulations that actually can, you know, possibly actually happen.
Exactly.
So, and you learn from it, exactly like you have learned.
Exactly. We're no longer importing products from other companies. Going forward, we're going to make it in-house, and if we can't make it in-house, we'd rather not sell it.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
delay
Exactly.
on the process. Okay. And so going forward now, sort of extrapolating into the future, what are your plans? Do you think exporting is going to be an option?
Yes.
Something you will eventually
Yes.
get into?
Yes, definitely looking at the European market, looking to overseas markets.
Yes.
But also now that we have a state-of-the-art in-house laboratory, filling machines and everything, we started branching out into contract manufacturing for other brands.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's like an diversification in your
Yes,
business
in
as
the
well,
business,
which
yeah.
makes sense, definitely,
Exactly.
because we don't actually know, like with COVID, no one knew what was going to be happening, and you know, a lot of companies had to diversify
You
into
have
doing
to.
third-party
Exactly.
manufacturing, or another type of brand, or
Exactly,
another
or looking at
product.
overseas. So lots of things are happening, and I'm really excited about what's to come.
So other than that big milestone that you mentioned, what have been some other the mini milestones? Is there been any sort of setbacks with regards to, because yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about microbial contamination and preservation of the product. So we were really looking and digging into formulation of products. Have you experienced any setbacks with like the time, like when you put a timeline together, you want to launch something, and then There's like,
Yes, all the
and
time.
it's not really a mini setback. But, you know,
It's a mini setback, but all the time, especially raw material. There are supplier shortages, and it takes a little bit longer to arrive, or packaging shortages. So sometimes we have to push out a new brand. A new launch for a month because
Yes.
unfortunately the packaging didn't come or the raw material wasn't enough. Especially now we've launched a new skincare range,
Yes.
and it sold out within the first week,
Wow.
which is great.
It is.
Yeah. But now, yeah, we have supplier shortages because the supplier is out of one of the ingredients, so now we're out of stock, unfortunately.
And your packaging, I don't know if you do everything sort of locally, or do you do importation of packaging? Do you try and keep your brand sort of local as lacquer?
As local as possible.
Obviously, certain
Yeah.
ingredients, actives, fragrances that we know is international, but with packaging, you try to keep.
Packaging as well. So
Yeah.
raw material, we're keeping 95% local, like as much as we can.
Yeah.
And packaging, it is hard, but we found really good packaging suppliers now,
Okay,
local
so
suppliers
brilliant.
as well, which is obviously much easier to deal with local companies compared to overseas companies.
And then when you started your business, I don't think I asked you this, it was obviously all online.
Yes,
Yes.
it was all online. We
Yes.
actually started on Takealot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that took a lot.
3,000
It did.
rand.
And now, so are you stocking? Have you got stockers? How's it working with your supply chain? Or what are your plans for supply chain going? Is it just only going to be Takealot? How is the strategy?
No, we're actually launching in a big retailer in November.
Oh
I can't
wow, that's
disclose the name
yes,
yet.
okay, exciting.
But that's really exciting. And
Okay.
We are it's like a small local department store that sells other local brands. So we'll be
Yeah.
having a store in the Rosebank Mall there from
Yes.
end of September onwards. So slowly we're starting to expand into brick and mortar.
And how do you deal with your marketing? Is it also in-house or do you have like a marketing company, or do you come up with the ideas? I'm asking these questions because starting as from your kitchen basically,
Yes.
from your house, how have you expanded? Because you know that marketing, you can have the
It's
best
everything.
product, and if you're not
Exactly.
marketing in the correct way, it'll never be
Exactly.
sold. So how do you manage your marketing of the brand?
I've got two marketing employees, and we do everything ourselves in-house. It's really important for me to have the direct control of what's happening, to be able to just execute your vision yourself without having to involve an agency.
Yeah, well, it keeps your
Yeah.
costs down as well, because as we
Yeah.
know, marketing is really
It's
can take
really
a pretty big
expensive.
part of your budget.
Exactly.
But we've realized now with social media, you kind of like do or die if you don't get involved in social media and you don't put your product
It's
out
everything. It's
Yeah.
everything. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah.
You kind of need to be everywhere.
there. No,
Yeah.
definitely. And I did see on your brand page, I've seen your website as well. And it's very nice. What I've noticed as well, your social media channels are quite different, because we know they're actually different a lot of the time, different audiences. So
Yes.
TikTok compared to Instagram compared to Facebook or anything like that, or the internet. So there is the mention about your sunscreen range. And there was a
Yes.
mention about that you struggled to get the right formulation or the formulator, and you had to take it out of the country. Can you tell us a bit about that? Did that take quite a long process, or did you really
Yes.
not get the help that you were supposed to get from South Africa? We've got some of the best
Unfortunately not.
experts.
Yeah, I was actually going to 3 different South African contract manufacturers to hopefully be able to help me with it.
Yes.
But unfortunately, they weren't able to bring my vision to life. And another unfortunate part as a young woman is that you don't get taken serious.
No.
Yeah,
no,
so
I understand
unfortunately,
that.
one of them, they did not take me serious at all. They asked if I can even meet the minimum order quantity, and I would have probably purchased 10 times the amount. So then obviously I left that.
Then how did you go ahead with, I mean, did you just Google? Do you ask, how did you go ahead finding the right person then, or the right company overseas to actually help you with this with the sunscreen range?
Lots of online research.
Yes.
I also had third parties advising me, obviously. That's why I did go for that supplier. So it wasn't just me doing online research. I did
So
have
I'm gonna
advice.
butt in. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually I feel very sad to
Yeah.
hear what I'm hearing, because South Africa really in sunscreens, we actually really on top, and comparative to Europe, we follow the European standards. We have some of the best consultants in South Africa. I'm sorry to hear that third-party manufacturers could not meet that. I must admit, I did see. I'm going to be very frank with you. And I did see that post about the sunscreens, and I felt very heartfelt about it, because it's actually crazy. We have some of the best formulators in South Africa,
Yes.
and the best consultants in South Africa. We're on par with sunscreens and with high-tech formulations. And the fact that you have to sit behind a computer and Google and do all of this is actually, it's crazy. But you
Yeah.
did it.
I did it.
So-
But I also think, because at the time when I started it, it was 1.5 years ago. So I
Yeah.
feel like at that point, the sunscreen market wasn't as ready as it is now. I think now we've got much better formulas available than what we had almost 2 years ago.
I'm going to disagree. Point of disagreement is that we have the top formulators and we have the top sunscreen experts in this country. It's just, I think it's who you know. It's who you know,
Probably.
and yeah, definitely. And maybe for sure, if you as a consumer are maybe feeling some of the formulations and it's not up to standard to what you think, but a lot of the formulations are also imported, and some of these formulations have been done actually by South Africans, and they in international markets. So it's quite a it's quite a difference that I'm hearing, and I'm sad
It's really
that you
interesting. Yeah.
that you didn't get what you were supposed to, because if anything, like I say, South Africa is on par with a lot of the international formulators, and it's sad to hear that you did so much of this work yourself, and we actually have those resources available. But it shows your grit.
Exactly. And we're trying again. Now we're trying in-house. So
And you're more set up now. I know that you've also, your R&D has
Exactly.
developed more.
Exactly. We've
you
got a
capable
full-on
hands.
lab.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that makes a big difference, I think, from a lot of the times with consultants and formulators. When brand owners come to them, they want like the whole world, and actually once you have your own R&D and your own, sort of capable hands, you're more
That's true.
understanding of actually what goes into, all these concepts
Exactly.
and these ideas. So the sky is kind of the limit, it sounds like. So other than for retail, what other channels would you be interested in selling via, other than your typical retail or online? Or is online, do you believe online is like, it is one of the better routes to market, or it has been for the start of your business, and it can still grow?
I'm still a very firm believer in online. It's a very efficient channel, especially if you're a new entrepreneur starting up and you don't have the connections or the capital to expand into brick and mortar right away. I think online is the way to go.
No, definitely. And staff complement wise, so you started basically with yourself, and you're now
Yes.
sitting at a much higher number,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
we've got 15 ladies now.
Wow.
Yeah. yeah.
So Ronald, are you feeling a bit out of it, being a man and all, with all just this girl talk of?
I think it's very interesting to listen to this, especially when you guys are discussing sunscreen, industry in terms of the topic, and I fully agree with what Beverly's saying there. And I think this platform, COSCAM, it's really one of those that we really have to be part of as a community, and to network with the right people. And I fully agree, sunscreen is one of our biggest assets in South Africa.
But
So I'm
it
enjoying
is-
the discussion.
It is also, thank you, Ronald. It is, getting back to sunscreens, and that we were having some of the topics on the presentation today, and a lot of it's sensorial. So often we want that sunscreen, and especially on the darker skin, we don't want the ashiness, and we want that silky smooth effect, or we want a certain SPF factor, and that is where I think a lot of the
You just wanted to go on like water, especially for us ladies wearing a lot of makeup. You can't now
Exactly.
put a whole white cast sunscreen all over your face.
No, so I'm also very particular too. I will not actually I don't even put the sunscreen body lotion on my face. I will just use a high SPF facial moisturizer on my skin because I actually cannot stand the tackiness. So
Yeah, and
I
it
understand to your
smells-
point, and the
yeah.
smell.
Yeah, exactly. But there's some really good SPFs out there right now, so that's at least a good development.
Yeah, and I think it's a good direction to go into because in our African climate, definitely SPF is, and this fallacy, this myth that the darker skin doesn't burn or is not going to get cancer is totally crazy. So we're
Yeah.
more now at a level in our society that we're actually understanding that all skin needs to be protected.
Exactly. Even
So-
inside, even in winter, you always need to wear it.
No, definitely. So going forward in the future with, like you said, new extensions, you are looking at some more things with regards to Africa or, Africa concepts or that, and diversifying into third-party manufacturing. Is there anything sort of like wild card that you would want for your business or were thinking of in terms of in the future? if you could have it all.
If I'm going to have it all. I think an expansion into the European market,
Yes.
especially me being a German,
Yes.
coming from Europe, just bringing my brand into Europe, that would be the cherry on top.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, I mean, coming from Europe, you would have some connections. Also, if you have your third-party manufacturers or manufacturers you've dealt with, there's a lot of experts in our industry.
Yeah.
We are actually all going to be, after this discussion, we're going to be having an expert panel discussion on exporting finished product and
interesting.
actually, raw material extract as well, because sometimes there's limited knowledge
There
about
is,
this.
exactly. Especially I want to bring a South African brand to overseas brands because we always, in South Africa, we're always crazy about brands from overseas. So why not switch it the other way around? Why not have Europe go crazy about a South African brand?
No, exactly. So, no, I'm very thrilled to hear about how you started. It's always, I think it's encouraging. I mean, the whole idea on having you here on set is that you're also using key actives in your product, key ingredients that actually do the job.
Yes.
And it's not about necessarily using the newest, trendiest ingredient. A lot of the time, I always say I'm a firm believer that you take key ingredients that have been working for years and you mix and match. And that's kind of what you've done. You've stuck to some key ingredients that are, and they really do the job
Of course,
at the price
exactly.
that people can afford.
Affordable skincare that works.
So
Yeah.
I must just tell you something humorous, since I'm so full of cheesy jokes today. Is that before I actually knew so much about your company, Standard Beauty, my daughter, I mean, she's 11, 12 years old, but big TikToker, and just, I mean, she knows more about cosmetics sometimes, I think, than I do. And I remember we were driving somewhere in Sandton, I think, and she's like, Mom, oh, Standard Beauty. And me in my blonde hair capacity, I'm like, no, that's the Standard Bank. They must be doing something with cosmetics. Because Sandton is always full of Standard Bank
Yes.
and Nedbank.
Oh, so you've seen the billboard. Good to know that it worked.
So I'm driving, I'm not even looking, I kind of just look like that. I see something with cosmetic on, and I'm like, oh, they must have made some association with this.
So you thought Standard Bank
But she
branched
knew more.
into cosmetics.
But she knew more about your company than I did. So
Oh,
you know
that's
what? You're
lovely.
reaching out to
Yeah.
you're reaching out to them when they're young.
How old is your daughter?
She's 11 going on
Oh,
12.
sweet, yes. Amazing. It's good
So
to see that we also reach the young ones.
And that's just the social media platform. So yeah, so before we hand over, I just want to check with Ronald if there's questions from the
Very interesting from what you just discussed now. I think one of our viewers at home is asking about something related to brand. So they saying, I'm not sure about the regulatory question, but they're saying who checks the brand regulatory and claims?
So we do have a cosmetic chemical engineer, and she obviously checks everything. We do microbiological testing, stability testing, sample group testing.
In terms
so
of the
that is all
claims, yeah.
yes, so that
Okay.
is all checked.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, I think, as this evolves into our next topic with the experts coming in terms of the brands and the export markets and all that. So, yeah, thank you very much for that.
Perfect.
Perfect.
you.
So,
Thank you so
Anne,
much for having
Catherine,
me.
thank you very much. You've lightened up our life a little bit with your bright pink colours today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be interviewed for the Coscam Society.
No, for sure. And we're now all part of the same industry, and hopefully, we can use our resources to help each other. And being part of Coscam definitely is it's
definitely.
the correct
got its
information
benefits.
going out there, and
Definitely.
it's really is who you know, and to get the best information. So we hope that it has been some benefit for you as well.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
So we're going to say thank you to Anne. And I'm going to be moving on now to the last session for the day. And the last session for the day is actually very close to our heart for exporting. And before I introduce all the speakers, just briefly going to be saying that we're just going to be following a loose agenda for discussion and just covering, because we have quite a few people sitting in-house with us, and that's going to be online. And we're just going to loosely cover some sort of trials and tribulations in the industry, some organizations that we need to be aware of, where there's taxes, licenses, just general. We're going to let the conversation flow, because we don't always have these platforms available on the Coscam platform. So we've actually got experts from all over. So I still have my co-host Ronald with me, but what I am going to do is I'm going to ask each person first, those that are in-house with me that have been able to join me, to introduce themselves, just a sentence or two, so that those who don't have their abstract book and who don't have all the ins and outs of each person understand who we've actually got in our panel today. So first I'm going to welcome Anina. Ooh, welcome.
Baie dankie. Thank
So
you.
if you can just give a sentence or two who you are and what you're up to, what you do.
Oh, what a nice privilege to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Anina van der Walt. I'm a registered pharmacist, but I'm a regulatory affairs pharmacist. So I work with medicine, complementary medicines, ethical medicines, medical devices. But yes, my first love is cosmetic products. So I'm also quite au fait with the cosmetic product regulations, and I'm a cosmetic product safety assessor.
Thank you, Anina. And then to the left or right of me, whichever way you want to say, I have Janine. So Janine, if you can introduce yourself, please. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks
So-
for the invite. Hi everyone, I'm Janine Fitzpatrick. I've been in the industry a few years, having worked in various sectors from regulatory through to academia through to sales. Currently I'm a formulations chemist at Union Swiss for BioOil, but we're a company that exports, etc. So through the industry experience, we've had quite a bit of exposure over the years to the regulatory requirements.
Thank you, Janine. And also sitting with us today is Will, right at the corner, but far but not least. So tell us about yourself, Will.
Thanks, Bev. Yeah, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be the thorn among the roses. My name is Will Kitsia. I'm the Managing Director of Botanica Natural Products. Botanica produces active ingredients, plant extracts, and African oils in Limpopo province, and then we export these to the US, to Europe, and to Asia as well.
Okay, perfect. And then our online guest, John Knowlton. John's back, the murderer.
Yeah, back here, Beverly. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invite, Beverly. That's the second one in 2 days. So my name is John Knowlton. My company is Cosmetic Solutions. We're a consultancy company in South Africa offering a wide range of services, but specifically this afternoon, I think, formulation design, regulatory affairs, and good experience in some African botanicals. So hopefully it's useful.
And John is also going to be representing CTFA, so he's also wearing 2 caps from Cosmetic Solutions and CTFA as well, if there's any questions. And Sina, my dear, please introduce yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Beverly. Good afternoon, everyone. There's an echo.
Oh, we can hear you. There is a slight echo, but you can maybe continue. Sina, did we lose you?
Can you hear me?
Oh, perfect. That's better. That's better.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sina Musetla from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. I work within a branch that focuses on industrial policy development. My responsibility is to develop sector strategies and industrial policy for the cosmetic sector. We work very closely with all companies, multinational, large companies, small and startup companies. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sina. Yes, we have some heavy-duty governmental regulations in the house, so that's good to know. And then last but not least, we have our freight forwarders. Can you please introduce yourself, Susan? Oh, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I didn't unmute.
Come on.
I'm Susan.
Yes.
This is Nadira. I'm on the sales front at Roller Grindrods. I'm here to support any importers and exporters interested in starting exporting or even importing. And then Nadira is on the export front.
Hello, Nadira.
Okay, hi everyone. Lovely to be here. My name is Nadira Siulau. I'm the export manager, Durban, Johannesburg, Africa for Roller Grindrods. Any questions you have regarding exports, fire away. I've been in the industry for 29 years, so I should be able to answer your questions.
Don't give away your age. We're just all doing anti-aging skincare actives here today. Don't say your age.
She doesn't know it.
So as I mentioned, thank you for all your introductions. As I mentioned, it's going to be really a loose discussion. The main aim from the discussion, I would like to concentrate a bit about exporting into Africa, but of course into Europe and the UK, Australia. But generally, if we can talk a little bit about Africa, if we know, of any special things, because what we're finding in the industry, especially being in the consultancy industry, we're getting customers, small brand owners that have started selling. They're getting bigger and bigger, like we had earlier before. And Catherine from Standard Beauty, they're looking at exporting. They don't have a formal partner, and often they don't actually know who are the right people to go to. So that's why we decided to use this platform where we can share all the organizations, or as Sina might give us some idea as well, what the government also provides. So what we're going to kickstart off with Will is just on your side, especially since I don't want to say you're a farmer, because you're much more than a farmer, but dealing with raw materials and having to export, what are some of the main sort of concerns that you've seen with export? Has it changed since you started in this industry?
Thanks, Bev. Yes, I am a farmer, and I'm proud of it. I'm now venturing into cosmetics, but we've been very fortunate. So first of all, we produce ingredients. So we're not in finished cosmetics. And we've been very fortunate that we have a French business partner that helped us a lot, especially with our exports into Africa. So when you're looking at Africa, it's most of all Francophone Africa, so Ivory Coast, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, these places, or West African countries that produce mainly skin brighteners or hair relaxers. And through this association that we have with this business partner, we've gained access to this market because it's not an easy one to crack. It's not an easy place to export your product to. The red tape is very, very challenging, and especially if you have to do it in a different language, which is French for most of it. So we've learned quite a few tricks throughout the process, but we haven't seen a lot change in Africa over the past 5 or 8 years that we've been doing it. To the rest of the world, it's very different because the barriers to entry are much, much higher in terms of your regulatory requirements. But Africa, I think, is still an uncovered gem. There's still a lot of potential over there, but you have to find the right partner to access it properly.
No, definitely. So going on from that, Susan or Nadira, if I can direct the question to you, what is the biggest issue really with exporting from South Africa into one of the African countries? Sometimes I know, like for example, Nigeria has NAFDAC, and they have certain, governmental organizations that it makes it a bit difficult, and M forms and all of that. So is there anything you can share with us that exporters, whether it's raw material like Will mentioned, or finished product, that you are dealing with on a daily basis, or that you've dealt with your customers into Africa?
So we have various exporters into Africa. I think first time it's for us on the beauty side of things. But the one thing I can say is that try and keep your terms of sale to CFR if possible. D-term sale I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with shipping and what the terms are.
We are.
So D terms means that you're going to take the risk on the other side, and I wouldn't suggest that. Rather do it on a C term or a F term, where the consignee on that side takes responsibility for his goods. And anything that happens, the risk that happens in Africa doesn't come back to bite you here.
And then just to jump in, obviously, sorry, is that obviously with every country in Africa, there's so many different rules. So working with an agent like ourselves, where we've got people positioned in each country, we can sort of lean on people to get the right answers, which paperwork would be required, what the rules and regulations would be. But I think for most countries in Africa, we still sort of suggest that if your client is based there, they deal with an agent in their country. It just keeps things a little bit more
easier,
and above board,
and less risk to you.
Yeah, sort of more manageable and controllable. So, and have you noticed, like as Will was saying, there's with the Congolese, the French-speaking companies or countries, Ivory Coast, everything you have to do in French, which is not. We don't see that in the other countries. I mean, English is like a standard language, so it seems quite bizarre.
It's a very interesting experience exporting to these countries, and I shouldn't say too much, but a lot of these the companies that we've dealt with are Lebanese companies. So you have to make sure who you invoice and where the documents go and how you get paid. So it really is like a minefield trying to get the product into there. But usually they're very loyal. So once you've actually cracked that code, it's a customer that keeps on coming back. But in our experience, luckily, we do have that sort of French connection, so we can translate our documents, but it's very difficult for the first timer.
Yeah, and Ronald, if I can ask you from coming from an AMCA perspective.
Very interesting, because when you're talking about the Franco or the Lusophone, I'm very much affair with the Portuguese-speaking countries, and from our side, it's not necessarily more the administration part, it's more the branding side, because what Africa means, and I think I'm very happy Sina is there to look into, maybe starting with the SADC region, for example, on how easy it is to go into a Swaziland or Lesotho, because when you go into in Angola, for example, and you find that you are unable to translate correctly, or maybe you can't get, the good Brazilian or Portuguese language within there, Brazilian companies takes over. I went into Angola to find 60% of hair care products being exported into the country from Brazil, whereas we, it's part of our SADC region, So it's one of those things where I think the panel being here, with the government representative, it's exactly what's important for us to know exactly what they need that we can supply, because we've got everything, as Will was saying, but the difference is the nuances and the partnerships, which is much, much more interesting.
Absolutely. If I could just add there, I think the psychological distance between you and your customer is a very important thing when exporting into Africa. So you have to understand the customer. They expect you to come there. They expect you to see them face to face. And COVID has had a massive impact on that, with people trying to do everything virtually. This is still a very old school mentality where you have to show that you're serious about bringing your product into that market. So you have to travel there, you have to break bread with them, and you have to see them and spend time there. So that is still a very different market in that sense.
So just to pose a question to Janine, with the company that you work with exporting all over, is your supply chain different? Do you have distributors? Is that sort of taken care of?
Yeah, so how we work is we work in a distributor space. So typically we try and have compliance, but we support them, because one of the easiest ways in is to have, as I said, people on the ground who understand the lingo. They understand the ways of working on the floor. They understand the nuances of the regulatory. And then what you can do is you can support in that space where they find their gaps, but they've got those built relationships already, rather than you being the outsider trying to go in, because it is very difficult in that space. So we fully work with a distribution network, and a couple of companies I've worked with have worked in that space.
And Sina, if I can pose a question to you, coming from DTI, there are various channels of DTI that help with manufacturers exporting into Africa. If you could maybe just expand on branches of DTI that help with such things.
Okay. Thank you, Beverly. So the DTIC has got about 16 branches We have a branch that focuses on exportation, another one on investments, other ones on financial, industrial finance, and then of course I come from industrial policy. So I'm not going to elaborate on all of them, but for the purposes of this conference, we assist companies that are into manufacturing with funding to expand their factories so that they can be compliant to GMP, especially in the cosmetics sector. You need to be GMP compliant and at least ISO 9001 compliant. So we do have funding streams to assist companies. And then we also have other programs like the Export Individual Participation Finance Scheme, where if a company identifies a certain market where they want to go and do a market research in that particular country, DTIC can fund them. But of course, a company has to apply to go to a certain market to do market research. And the cosmetic sector has got an export council co-funded by DTIC as well. Cosmetic companies are free to join the Export Council. Of course, you do pay a membership fee, and the Export Council's mandate is to take companies to different trade shows globally, and of course, to also local cosmetic shows. So people who are interested in joining the Cosmetic Export Council, they can contact myself so that we can introduce them to the Cosmetic Export Council. And we can also introduce them to other DTIC programs that facilitate exportation and participation in different trade shows.
Perfect, Sina. And John, if I can direct a question to you, I'm not sure if you deal with clients going into Africa, but obviously you have a lot of experience with your European and your UK customers. It sometimes feels to me that it sometimes seems a bit easier to export to these countries rather than within Africa, on the African continent. It shouldn't be like that, but...
Yeah, I think you're right, Beverly. I mean, absolutely, because I think the regulations are far more defined and understood. I would say the first piece of advice, and to answer your question, I do get a lot of people coming to me for advice on how to export. I would say whether it's within Africa or outside of Africa, the first thing to do, and I think Will has found this because Will and I have worked together, is try and get someone on the ground, particularly in the African countries, because if you don't have someone on the ground, you're going to really struggle. If I take Nigeria, for example, you've got to look at NAFDAC. You need to understand the NAFDAC regulations, but trying to interpret those from afar and not having somebody speaking on your behalf to the Nigerian government, you're really going to struggle. So I think that get someone on the ground, make sure you understand the regulations, make sure you talk to a freight forwarder, for example, like Susan, to understand what the exportation requirements are. And very importantly, please talk to Sina. They've got a lot of information and opportunities for exporting into Africa, certainly. And also talk to Sekosa. Sekosa really, these days, Tourism really is very helpful. And I think there's a lot of resource out there. I think this is very much a case, Beverly, of not what you know, but who you know. Picking up on the right people. And I think that's the way to be successful.
No, definitely. And for Anina, for you, with regards to your sort of pharmaceutical technical background, I also know that, when we're exporting stuff and to have the PIF or the product information file, you're a responsible person. So could you explain or give any advice or recommendations with regards to responsible person on the other side in Europe or UK? How does that all work, or what's some advice to the public?
I think it's very important to those type of relationships are just as important as Will and everybody else actually mentioned, like your RP on the other side is just as valuable, but you must identify your product market right before you start actually manufacturing. You must decide where you want to go, where will your target market be, so that you are you get to know the regulations in that country and that area, because if you start and you don't know that some ingredients are prohibited, for instance, you will do everything you can get your product market ready as you see or you feel it is, and then when you want to export, then you having big trouble over there. So I would say everything is interconnected. If you don't some people who want to cut on regulatory aspects. I would say it's very dangerous. You're steering into the wrong direction if you don't know your target markets and your regulations at the country where you want to export to. So.
Well, I think you're speaking Janine's language, because coming as a formulation chemist, you're also starting from the beginning. You need to know this information prior. So have you got any advice to give?
So you've also got to be cautious of trying to do a global launch and then decide on your market, because you sometimes think, oh, we're going into, let's say, first world only. So I want to go to this country, I want to go to US, I want to go to Europe, I want to go to Australia. They'll all be compliant with Europe. It's not fully true. So they each have their own listings. A lot of markets have different regulatory, so you can decide we're predominantly going to use Europe, but it's worth speaking to your suppliers up front and saying, can I please see compliance for the following? It's worth checking like the Chinese INCI. It's worth looking at the Australian regulations. You've got to look at things like REACH. Look at those type of things up and of course the annexes for Europe. Look at all of that up front, the FDA requirements, and then decide, okay, I can formulate a product in this space and be compliant across the markets, or I can't actually get what I'm wanting out of this without using this ingredient, but I have a problem in this market. Therefore, I won't continue in that space. And then you make the decision accordingly and go from there.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, Janine. And on your side, John, have you also experienced maybe with some of your customers and companies that you've dealt with sort of, long delays, or if they haven't done it the right way, have you got some recommendation or
Yeah,
examples?
I think, the short answer is yes, Beverly. I think the biggest problem that I've experienced and my clients have is in sunscreens. Because sunscreen regulations differ quite significantly around the world. In South Africa, they are cosmetic products ever since 1997, so they generally follow the cosmetic requirements. But remember, in the US, sunscreens are over-the-counter drugs. Therefore, you've got to follow the FDA monograph, the Section 21 monograph. Australia, you've got to follow the Therapeutics Goods Association. In Canada, you've got to follow Canada Health, and so on. And I've had clients come to me with formulations that have been developed in South Africa for sunscreen products, and wanting to take them across to the States, and they can't do it because their sunscreens are not listed on the FDA monograph. So it's not a question of a delay, it's a question of complete reformulation. So if I pick one category, I think sunscreens are probably the most difficult. The trick is, I think, to reiterate what has been said before, is to make sure you know the regulations in the destination country. And again, having someone on the ground will give you insights to those regulations that you may not be able to find elsewhere. So that would be my advice.
And to Susan and Nadira, as a logistic company, I know that you deal with a lot of different companies and not just cosmetics, but in cosmetics, if you could share, have you seen an increase in export at all with what you're dealing with, or has COVID messed up things? Do you have anything to share with us that export has changed maybe?
So I think depending on the size of exporter you're talking about, we've seen possibly a slight increase in your smaller orders, so your courier and your air freight orders. But on sea freight, unfortunately, South African export market at the moment is jammed. So just the access to available equipment, things like that for export is a problem.
Freight rates as well.
Freight rates have skyrocketed. So big orders when it comes to full containers, we're seeing a lot of problems, but on this, and we've actually seen a decrease over. So the shipments are there, but the actual space on vessels is a problem. And that's why we are, so from a smaller order perspective, definitely we've seen an increase. There's definitely, Africa is interested in what South Africa's got to offer, but there is the challenge of equipment, of space, of routings, all of that.
And of course, there's the freight rates have actually doubled in the last 6 months on exports as well.
No, we all are very aware of that as finished product manufacturers, as raw material manufacturers. Freight is terrible. It's just, it's actually...
Just bringing in Sina there, it's very interesting to just listen to the requirements and the regulatory framework. And, company like AMCA, it's quite easy to navigate the situation. I'm just thinking about Standard Beauty, we just interviewed now, and maybe bringing in Sina from DTI in terms of, she mentioned something about research into a host country, but are they also assisting when I do not have that product? For example, the research in terms of what Alina was talking about, trying to find out the regulatory framework within that space, and who is that partner, that kind of a thing, where I might have a small business within the South African context, but wanting to maybe go into the next big market. So I just wanted to find out from Sina if that research involves that kind of funding.
Companies asking about sending products to Nigeria and how should they go about, and this is just an example.
Yeah.
So a good thing is that government has got what we call foreign economic representatives in different countries, and these are South African people that were sent to those countries to serve South Africa, but in that particular country. So from my sector desk, we will email the FER, the Foreign Economic Rep in that country, and ask them to assist our particular company in terms of information on compliance to the retail sector in that country, and to also vet any contract that our company in South Africa want to enter into with a company in Nigeria. So we can assist to do the vetting of a contract through our FERs in that particular new market that you want to enter. We can assist with market research information in that country. So there are many other things that we can assist with. And another thing I want to add is some of the countries we export to as South Africa need what we call a certificate of free sale or a certificate of manufacture. So we work very closely with the CTFA to assist these companies with the issuance of certificate of manufacturing, which comes from government, and the certificate of free sale, which CTFA can also issue to the companies, so that your products are easily acceptable in the market or the country that you are exporting to. So in a nutshell, we do have FERs that speak for us or do research for us in different country markets. I hope I've answered you, Ronald.
No, that's an excellent answer. I think that's basically, this information is sitting there, and I think this platform is going to assist a lot of those small businesses. What you just explained now to me, it might be easier for me to go into my legal, office and find this information. But what you just explained now, if I were to, tell, Standard Beauty who just left now, you might find that we'll spend the next month just accessing some of these opportunities. Thank you very much.
So just to expand on that, Sina, you mentioned the free sale certificates and these certificates that CTFA work, that you work with the government. So what is a lead time on something like that? Because for me, I know we have access to so much, but then a lot of the time the lead time is like 6 months, or products ready for export, and then we don't have this documentation. Would you be able to expand on lead time on these type of certificates required?
Okay, so I won't speak for CTFA, but from our side, when you send us an email and request a certificate of manufacture, we request you to send us a list of products that you want to export, the country of export, and your company address, and we do give, of course, that you comply to GMP and ISO 9001. And because we do visit companies, we do site visits, so we know who's manufacturing in the country. We can't say you manufacture when you are not manufacturing. So we also do site visits. But in your question now, it will take us a day to issue such a certificate, for as long as you give us what we ask you to provide to us. And you must sign an affidavit to say that you are manufacturing and you take full responsibility of this particular product, because we as government can't put our neck on the block for a company when we issue this particular certificate. So we work very closely with companies and we want to trust them. But over and above, we also do take site visits. Like for instance, tomorrow I'm going to KZN to also do a site visit to a particular company that recently requested a certificate of manufacturing.
Sina, I'm going to promote that you've got a 1-day lead time.
and John,
I'm very excited.
and I think John is there as well from CTFA. He agrees that they can do it within a day. So
24 hours, eh?
Yeah,
No, Eskom, yeah,
I
please.
wouldn't want to say a day, but look, it's very, very quick. If you've got all the right information, I think the important thing here, if you're wanting a certificate of free sale, which in many countries you have to have, then it's very important that you actually have the right information. So the thing to do is to contact the CTFA, speak to them about the requirements. They'll give you a list of requirements that you need. And all you really need to do is to show that you can comply with the regulations that are appropriate to the country you're going into. You won't have to go through a full artwork review or check or anything like that. There'll be some very, very simple checks. Providing you can give the information to the CTFA, they'll turn the certificate for you around within a week, certainly. I mean, I'm not going to say a day because that's putting extra pressure on them, but certainly within a few days. So there's no 6 months waiting list at all. It's but my advice would be make sure you've got everything ready before you start to do this, because where the problems come in my experience, is you've maybe got 90% of what you need. You start going into the process, and then halfway along you run into difficulty, and it's always more difficult to go back and start again than it is to make sure you're right in the first place. So spend the extra time up front, make sure you've got everything you need, and it should be a smooth process.
So from your side, Will, have you had issues with, I know you have a partner that you've worked with, but with regards to this type of paperwork and...
I think, first of all, it's different, very different between selling active ingredients or oils and these raw products than it is selling final products. I can't speak to that. But what I can say is that we've been helped enormously by DTIC. Sina's actually been up to Limpopo to our facility as well, 500 kilometers away. So she does go and visit companies. But they've helped us quite a lot, and they've actually partnered with other international organizations as well. So SIPO, the Swiss Import Promotion Office, CBI of the Dutch government, and they work with these other organizations to help you actually get your products into these markets. I haven't worked with them so much in Africa. And in Africa, we've had the relationship that we could depend on previously with our partner, and that's helped us. So we haven't really run into issues, but the regulations also change from, especially when you do the import. It's not so much the ingredients, but whether you have original certificates, whether you have them in French, whether you have them originally signed, whether you have them couriered there, do they get there at least 5 days before the product arrives? All these types of things change sort of from on a very short notice. So that's been a challenge for us to get used to. And I just want to add one other thing that Janine alluded to earlier, which has been very important for us, which is the adherence and making sure that you go and have a look at the China list of ingredients. For us, that's been an absolutely vital cog, because we're selling ingredients into Europe, but the moment you get there and you say, well, these products are fine in Europe, they say, well, we can't sell them to Unilever, or we can't sell them to various distributors because they're not on the China list and they won't be accepted in China. So then you go back to the drawing board and you start all the way from scratch again. So before you start, make sure that the ingredients you're using are on that list if you want to do multinational client sales.
And thank you, Will. And Susan and Nadira, from your side, so as a layman question, because like I say, we've got an audience with we saw you escape, Nadira, we saw that. So we have an audience where we have some of these smaller manufacturers or smaller brand owners. The question I pose to you is, if the company comes to you, say for example a cosmetic company, have they got all their documentation ready for you to go ahead, or are you still advising them for certain documentation that's needed? What is your experience with the cosmetic companies that you've dealt with?
They have the documentation already in order. So that means you've gone through to customs, you've applied for your exporters, importers code. You know the regulations in the country you're going to be exporting to. For example, and I'm just using an example, no offense meant to anyone, but you could be, for example, exporting to a Muslim country, or a country that's predominantly Muslim, and you could have something of a pork product in your products. That won't work. So the homework would have been already done by yourselves. Once you've got the exporter's code, you're kind of ready to go. You've kind of ready. We will help you with along every step of the way, whatever you need in terms of getting your commercial invoices, filling in your documents, whatever is needed for shipment out of South Africa. We can guide you and help you along all of that, but your first step is to ensure that you do have that code, because without that code, you can't export.
Well, that's specifically your exporter's code. And then in terms of other paperwork that you required, we do have a customs team that we would pass any paperwork through, but just for them to check before obviously we proceed with any shipments. But unfortunately, it is more of a responsibility of the exporter to have everything in order, and we are there just to do the logistics leg. We can't advise 100% on the rules and and the paperwork requirements for each country.
Yes, for sure. So it does help having. It doesn't look like there's just one person you deal with. Obviously, DTI and from Sina's side and SACOSA definitely is a big help. But you have to sometimes deal with several people. If it's someone doing your PIF document, if it's a consultant on this, but generally. My feeling is that if you're wanting to export that DTR CTFA, like John mentioned earlier, John, am I correct, is the first step to go to ask for a list of requirements, and then...
Sure, I mean, we can advise on that for sure, Beverly. And one thing I should say is that over the last 4 or 5 years, certainly the last 3 years, the CTFA worked very, very hard through Dushana, establishing relationships with African countries. So we've now got very good relationships with Kenya and with Nigeria and so on. And remember, even within Africa, and I think Will's alluded to this, even within the African countries, the regulations are very different. So if you're going into Nigeria, you've got to look at NAFDAC. If you're going into Kenya, you've got to look at KEBS. They all operate in very different ways. There is an initiative for a Pan-African sort of leveling the playing field, so to speak, on regulations, but it's very difficult to do. So I think, again, know the regulations of the country you're going into and who can assist you. And your comment, Beverly, about having a number of people helping you, that's absolutely essential. You're not going to get all the information you need from one person. It's not going to happen. So, pick up the right people and they'll take you along the way.
I think if I could just add on there, I think what everybody needs to understand as well is it's an investment to export your product. It's an investment that you're going to have to make to export your product, especially into a difficult or more challenging environment like West Africa or like East Africa. But the moment you've done that, then you've got competitive advantage. It's so much more difficult for the next person to follow you as well. So often it is worthwhile. There are some very, very tough learning moments that you have to go through. But while everybody's sort of clamoring for the red ocean of the easy market, you going to a blue ocean which is not being supplied by your competitors, you've got a competitive advantage and a barrier to entry for somebody else. So you're going to have to do your homework to make sure that it is actually viable and it's worth your while to go to that market.
And could we briefly just talk about, do we get that much benefit? And I'm trying to specifically relate this to the SADC region and in cosmetics. Do we get that much benefit from that being in place or not? Would you be able to?
In my experience, no. No, we don't get, not in the ingredient space at all. I think, first of all, we have to also understand that the natural products are growing in the same area. So we're all exporting from here. So if we go to trade shows in Europe, you sitting at a booth next to a company from Zim and another company from Mozambique or from Namibia. So you competing with each other. When it comes to finished products, I can't tell you.
Yeah. Sina, would you be able to elaborate a bit more on SADC, or could you comment more on that?
Okay. So when we do statistic analysis in terms of exports, South Africa's exports, about 80% goes to African countries. And of the 80% that we export to African countries, 60% goes to the SADC region. So SADC region is our biggest market in the cosmetic sector. And we talk about products like skin lotion and soaps. We do export a lot of those particular products. But the market is big in Africa when we look at ethnic skincare and hair care products. So we really need to do serious research and development to come up with new products and use natural ingredients that especially grow in Africa to use in our products to target those export markets in African countries. And another issue that I wanted to add is that we are currently as Africa, we have entered into African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I think most people know about it. It's in the media, everywhere people talk about it now, where about 54 African countries have signed up for free trade agreement. But of course, it will come with annexures in terms of regulations. We as a country need to decide which product we need to protect in terms of them moving freely in the African region. So we can decide that, okay, our cosmetic products or products that come from Angola or from any country into South Africa, we put 30% duty so that whatever, but on specific products, we can of course put import duties on all the products, because we expect our products to also move freely to other African countries. So the biggest thing to note is that we have now 54 countries open up for trade in Africa. It's a working process. Some of the countries have already enforced this agreement, but some are still getting their houses in order to implement this new trade agreement. And through SICOSA and of course through what we call National Pavilion Program in DTIC, we are taking companies to different African countries, the likes of Kenya and Ghana trade shows. I know cosmetic sector has got big trade shows in Kenya and in Ghana on an annual basis, and we are partnering with those countries to get our companies to go and exhibit in those countries. But our biggest market is SADC, and it's because we have what we call the SADC Global Harmonization System, which is run by SABS, where labeling and classification of products are harmonized within the SADC. So it's a good starting point for us to use that particular platform, the SADC GHS platform, because it assists us to harmonize labeling and classification of products in the SADC.
Thank you, Sina. It was a very elaborative explanation, which is good. I just feel, my personal feeling from traveling throughout Africa all these years is that it's like it's easier for other countries to export to African countries other than South Africa, because often I see also the AMCA products or whatever, the prices are so high, it's not even comparative to other products exported. That's my personal feeling. I don't know if I'm being too subjective, but I see it in every country, Nigeria, Congo, Senegal, it doesn't matter where I am. If you see a South African product, the price is so much higher than another product, which is the formulation, I know, is not even as good as the quality coming from South Africa. So I know it's very subjective, it's very heartfelt. But
I would agree with you, because one of the questions I wanted to ask is this free trade agreement. I mean, I wrote about it 3 years ago in one of my dissertations, and yes. I still don't see if it's actually implemented. So I wanted to find out from Sina, where do we follow this process? Because if you're saying certain countries and it's only 5 out of 54, then it's not obviously working. And because, as I say, it's a very good document for free trade on certain products, obviously selected by industries, but I'm just trying to find out the implementation process or the progress on that.
Yes, of the 54, sorry, Devli, if I can come in, of the 54 countries, I know about 34 or 32 are currently implementing it. But as I said, it's a phased-in process. We can't do everything all at the same time. And if we want to participate now, we have a task team that reports to the president, and it's different working groups. And I forgot the person who chairs that particular platform, but I can introduce you to them, because they are working on how to phase it in so that implementation can flow easily in Africa. And we also have a very close relationship with the secretariat of that program as well. So if you want more information and to participate in these platforms, especially in one of the working groups, there are different working groups that will focus on market access, on technical issues. We can link you up with the people, and then you can join in and participate.
Thank you, Sina.
Thank you very much, Sina.
So, Pierre, just, I mean, to finish off on that point, and I think it's not a cut and dried issue about exporting, because like I mentioned earlier, traveling into Africa, there's a lot of, from other companies, not South African companies, their product is dumped into the country. There's little tax, there's corruption, there's, so it saddens me that there is a need. One of the, I don't know if it was Sina or one of the participants said there is a need for having South African products in the rest of Africa. But price-wise, we are not really competitive, and I know our quality is better. I see it in every market, but I do know personally of lots of corruption at other companies, and they get their products into the rest of the African countries and still at a much lower price. So, you know, as much as we can discuss this ad hoc and we can go through all the right methods and procedures, I mean, this is real life reality that we are experiencing on our continent. So, you know, I think we have to we have to keep working at trying to get South Africa's products out there. Sena, just to mention while we've got you here as well, when you're talking about trade shows, I know obviously all of that sort of came to an end during COVID. So going forward, does DTI do? Are there more plans to? Obviously, there's a strategy now that COVID is a little bit better to deal with, but I know that all of those trade shows stopped during COVID. So what is the plan going forward in the next couple of years?
So the shows are back on track. As we speak now, Sicosa took about 15 to 20 companies to Sana in Italy. They are currently there as we speak. So yes, DTI is back on track. We are taking companies to different trade shows. And all the information is on our website, but if you're looking for specific information for the cosmetic sector, of course, contact us, the sector desk.
Great. And can you tell us any sort of good feel stories from trade shows that that have taken someone from, you know, zero to hero that DTI has helped with? I mean, not names, but I'm sure there must be some real big benefit for some of the companies at the trade shows. Not all of the companies maybe benefit as much, but
yes, I can speak of two, and I can even name the brands because they also speak about it, you know, quite often. So one is Ice Slices.
yes.
I do know that, yes, I think she sold the company, but when she entered the market with a brand, South Africa was not ready for the eye patches that I think they were made from aloe gel, so you just put them on the eyes and they relaxes the eye to that particular product. So we were not ready for such a product on our local market. We took her to American trade shows and European trade shows. She started exporting than selling locally. So export trade shows worked for her. It made wonders for her. And then we have a brand called Poshia M, a local brand by a local SMME. And we assisted her with product testing, and government funded her for local trade shows, and also through supply development programs that government has entered into partnership with the retailers. She managed to get into the likes of Macro, now Pick n Pay and Checkers. So the local trade shows and these international trade shows do give benefit back to us as government, because companies grow from one strength to the next, and their production levels also increases due to them being present out there through our promotion activities using trade shows.
And Will, has your company benefited?
Yes, also will benefit.
Just checking, Sina.
But she's only mentioning the roses, not the thorns. So, no, absolutely, we've benefited a lot. Between 2014 and 2016, we attended trade shows with the assistance of the DTIC. And it's been amazing to work with them. I think that we've seen a lot of manufacturers, ingredient manufacturers, especially natural ingredient manufacturers from South Africa, being taken along to European trade shows especially, and starting to make inroads there. I think I always sort of sing the same tune, which is, I think now the responsibility is for these companies that have benefited to take other companies with them and say, listen, we've already learned these hard lessons. Let us be sort of mentors for the next generation, because there are many more companies doing that. But you have to learn the pitfalls, and if you can learn them from someone else's experience and paying school fees, it's so much better than having to knock your head against the same wall like the person ahead of you. So I think the DTI has done really well, but we also have to mention the white elephant in the room, and that is bioprospecting and what that has done. So especially for Ice Slices, I know that they reverted back to from using aloe ferox to using aloe vera, just because the red tape was so difficult. So if we're going to be really honest with ourselves and walk our talk, we have to say we have to get some collaboration between DTI and the Department of Environmental Affairs, or DFFE as it is now, and say, how do we promote these indigenous South African products and make sure that they actually get onto that stage and tick all the boxes that are there from the regulatory side.
Thanks that you actually mentioned the bioprospecting. I was thinking of it earlier and I forgot. John, do you have any comment, or do you come across many issues with regards to bioprospecting and what Will was saying on? Can you elaborate on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room, as Will says. Unfortunately, it's a huge problem in South Africa, and I would say it's counterproductive to our export initiatives and job creation. It's never worked well. Certainly, I don't know now, but permits were taking 6 or 7 months to get. It's not a very user-friendly part of government, unfortunately, unlike DTIC. And to be honest with you, Beverly, a number of my clients have actually asked me to remove African ingredients from their formulations and replace them with European ones, simply because the red tape they go through is just not, they just can't do it. So I think, unfortunately, the whole initiative for bioprospecting and benefit sharing, although I like the principle, and obviously it's part of the Nagoya Protocol, I don't think that South Africa have executed it well at all. And I think it's been a big stumbling block in developing our market for for African ingredients overseas. I mean, Will tell you many stories, I'm sure, about his experiences getting into that space. So it's a big problem, Beverly. Yeah, big problem.
Yeah, well, thanks for your input there, John. I know it is like a white elephant in the room. I just want to check with Ronald. Do we have any questions, Ronald?
Looks like we do have. Looks like there's a couple, but I'll start with the one asking about CTFA. CTFA always requests artwork review if it's a new product. So I think it was being answered.
Yes.
How close is our industry to being regulated?
How
Is that
close-
for me?
Yeah,
That's me, Ron.
I think John, you can answer that.
That's the second white elephant in the room, isn't it?
Sorry to put you.
How do I answer that and ensure my safety in the future? Promulgation should have taken place in 2017. In fact, the initial draft regulations were issued on the 16th of August in 2016. So the idea was the promulgation would take place in 2017. We're now in 2022, and to be very honest with you, we're no closer. A lot of the reason has been that there's been some discussions between, firstly, the dissolution of the MCC was the first big hurdle. The MCC was dissolved and replaced by SAPRA, which is part of the Department of Health, and now there's obviously a lot of debate about where cosmetics should lie. Should it lie under SAPRA or should it lie under the Department of Health? It still lies under Act 54. That's the one thing that is certain. I know the CTFA have, for a long time now, been speaking to the Department of Health, and my personal view, as well as the CTFA's view, I think, is that we would love to see a director of cosmetics in the same way that the food industry is handled, because I think we really need to have that expertise and that position. And I think if we had a director of cosmetics working under the auspices of Department of Health, I think we have a terrific opportunity. And South Africa is a success story waiting to happen, basically. And sometimes we're our own worst enemies. But the CTFA keep pushing. We keep talking to the Department of Health. We keep engaging with SAPRA. We're very, very willing to move forward. We have been for the last 3 years. We would just like to, just to ask government, and maybe this is a good platform to do it, ask governments and the department and SAPRA to work with us, and let's get these regulations promulgated as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thank you, John. And Ronald, is there any more?
No, I think there's just most comment about appreciating the contribution
channel,
from the panel and all that. So no questions as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can start to wrap up. Janine, is there anything else that you wanted to maybe add? Recommendation, one final word?
It really just comes down to know where you're going, know what they need, make sure you've done your homework up front and that you've got everything, because if you hit a hurdle later on, it's very difficult to reverse, and there'll be a lot of financial implications that will have occurred because you might have to reformulate, retest, etc.
And then COVID might just happen, and then you just got no money, and you just,
Game
it'll
over.
be- Game over. And then, Nina, from your side, any sort of parting recommendation, advice from your previous experience?
Well, I would say everybody that knows me also knows that I have a soft spot for the SMMEs, and I think if we can remember that it's difficult for them, and to help them wherever we can and mentor them and really build one another up so that we can move forward as a country, because a lot of our resources are not being applied because we are not looking after our small company owners. So we have to look at them. They are actually our bread and butter. It's not the multinats have everything that they need to support them, and sometimes we just forget about the small guys. And for me personally, I would like to see that move forward much more. And with that said, also my appreciation for what the DTI is actually doing, and it's just a matter of access and giving them the opportunity
Space.
to get there. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Nina. And from Susan and Nadira, sort of final parting words, recommendations for the industry?
So Rolex Grindrod does offer client training. So if anyone wanted to learn a little bit more about imports and exports in general, we do a very basic Incoterms, all of that, you can contact me. And then, yeah, anything to do with exports, Africa, further than Africa, Nadira's really got all the knowledge in that head. And yeah, we're here to support anyone that needs our help and guidance. Thank you for having us here today.
Perfect. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your supporting words. And Sina, one last word from advice from your side?
Okay, thank you, Becky. So one last thing I forgot to mention is that some of the African countries, not only African though, but because we are focusing on Africa, they require companies to register their products in those particular countries. So the DTIC, under a program called Export Market Investment Assistance, we do have a grant of about 300,000 rand per product, so you can apply for this grant, and then we co-fund towards the product registration cost in that particular country. And lastly, thank you so much for inviting DTIC to be on this platform, and please feel free to contact us on anything that you want to talk about in the cosmetic sector and many other sectors. We don't only focus on the cosmetic sector at DTIC. We have the automotive, the clothing and textiles, agro-processing. So if you want any information on those other sectors, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sina. Any last comment from your side, Ronald, as a
I think
brand manufacturer?
I think from having such a powerful panel, it would be important for the viewers, the people who've been with us the whole day, to really take what Anina said, and I think even Sina mentioned now, to participate, because we've got these programs. I think it's well to say we need to support them, but if they don't come to a platform like this, you might find that you're missing one crucial element just to take you to the next level. And I encourage them to keep on looking at the COSCEM website, and go to CTFA as well, just to check what's available. And I think that would really assist us, as you said, to develop these young and up-and-coming gems that we have in the country. Yeah,
No,
thank you.
definitely. Thank you, Ronald. So, yeah, really in a nutshell, I mean, my parting sort of takeaway, also what I've learned is basically getting back to what John said, is that it's not just one person. I mean, it's actually really is a couple of people, and it's the good connections that you have in this type of platform really can provide that. So, we thank you for everyone who had time. Our logistic partners, Susan and Nadira, thank you. We know that export is busy. It's jam-packed. So, it's always good to have the experts on all sides of these categories. And Sina, your advice has also been absolutely great. Thank you, because we think, and just today with our interview that we had with a small business owner, you come to realize in the questions that you ask that there's so much a lot of these companies don't know about. And so it's actually, this platform hopefully provides a solution to a lot of the smaller companies, and that's what we want. We want the small SMEs to actually start growing and be supported, and to understand where the support networks lie. So my takeaway is that it's definitely not just one person, one stop, one shop. And it's actually, don't try try to learn the mistakes of others. Do the homework first. Don't lose too much money. Don't get sick. And try and compete with all the other products that are dumped into Africa, and try and fly our South African flag high, because I still believe our quality is, if not comparable, definitely over a lot of other countries' products. So that's the main aim of the game. So thank you for all your time today. I know that everyone's busy. Thank you, John, for being on the platform again a second time.
Thanks, Beverly.
And we really appreciate all your recommendations, and thank you once again to the panel of online guests. So we are going to be closing very soon. I think it's been quite an intense day today, and hopefully very informative for the industry. So we're going to be closing off soon from our Vice President of COSCEM, which is Jacques. And Jacques, if you remember, joined us yesterday in the flesh, but today is online. And Jacques, hope you were listening to the export panel discussion, because I know that you also have experienced some issues yourself. So hopefully it's been a platform that has helped in some regards.
100%. Thank you, Beverly. Yeah, I think it's been a brilliant discussion, better than we could have expected. I got hooked on it like a good series, so it was a very good discussion. So well done on that. And yeah, I can't believe it's been another year since the last conference, and here we are at the end of it. So yeah, let's get to the closing address.
Perfect.
So from my side, dear delegates, speakers, and sponsors, from all of us here at COSCEM, we would like to thank you for taking the valuable time out of your schedule to attend and participate in COSCEM's annual scientific seminar. This has also been our second ever digital conference, and we are extremely proud of what we have accomplished with this new platform. We've listened to insightful and relevant research topics presented by experts both local and international. We also enjoyed observing 2 excellent panel discussions amongst industry specialists revolving around pertinent subjects that most of us have an invested interest in. At COSCEM, our goal is to educate, influence, and inspire all stakeholders in the cosmetic industry with a particular focus on science. The science of beauty is forever advancing, and therefore, in a world where we are overwhelmed with an overload of information, COSCEM aims to present you with the most vital updates, but also to provide a platform for further exploration. The heart and soul of the society lies in the time, dedication, and sacrifice of our members and our guests. So we thank you for your patronage. I would like to pay special gratitude to Beverly Gardner, who graced us with her charismatic presence as MC once again, and the scientific committee for all their hard work to realize this event. And also a special thank you to Wayne van Wyk, who's been a veteran in the scientific committee and COSCEM in general, who's been assisting us in the background, and I do hope he continues to do so in the future for sure. Also a good thank you to MGG for yet another magnificent production. And as always, an immeasurable thank you to the lady that makes all of us look like we know what we're doing, Bridget McDonald. I also just want to thank all of our sponsors, Evonik for sponsoring the abstract book, and also then the marketing slots, which were sponsored by Azilas Okila, Chempure, CJP Chemicals, Natchem, Orchem, Savannah Fine Chemicals, Simrise, and the Care Company. And that's it from me. So until next year, stay safe, everyone.
So perfect. Just I don't have to talk, so I don't know why I have to talk.